picking up back with the Encampment series. This is going to be the second part of a series. I don't know how long this will go, but I guess we'll just recap from what we talked about in the last video just real quick. We're going into the encampment, basing this off of a circular tabernacle and extrapolating that out into a circular encampment of the tribes. So one thing I didn't mention in the previous video was sort of this, as they're marching out, this general direction. So in chapter 2, when we have the actual march out, we're starting with Judah going eastward and sunriseward. And then it's going to say next to him is Issachar, then Zebulun. And then we're going to go southward. In the southward direction, it'll be Reuben. Next to him, Simeon, then Gad. Right, and then we get the passage about Levi marching out at somewhere in the midst of the camp. And then the next passage will be Ephraim to seaward. Next to him is Manasseh, then Benjamin. Dan is going to be going northward. Next to him, Asher, then Naphtali, hindmost. This will be hindmost, right? So we're completing the circle this way. I needed to point out some of the, in the scripture, you'll note where it says next to Judah is Issachar and then Zebulun. So you'll see that in the mechanic of that scripture, you'll notice that there's the differences as you're going through on this march out. So where are we at with Judah starting eastward and sunriseward, right? And a host of him mustered, okay, or appointed, remember. And then camping on him, stock of Issachar. Okay. And then it says, instead of this, in the ones encamping on him, stock of, we just go straight into stock of Zebulun. So that mechanic is going to be repeated throughout these scriptures as you go through the tribes in the different directions. Again, the direction here is going to be eastward right here and sunriseward. So we're given two directions for Judah. And then when we get to Reuben is southward. And we're going to get down here to, in 2:18 is going to be Ephraim, who is going to be, where are we at? Seaward right here, okay? Seaward, not westward, but seaward. And then Dan is going to be northward. Okay, so that's our actual directions. You see the route right here is Pei Noon. So Pei and Noon you're going to find in the a lot of different things when you're looking at Ezekiel with the faces. Okay, so you'll just note that the direction of north is associated with that same route for faces. And that'll be important, I think, when you start trying to decipher Ezekiel's vision down the road. But to go back in here, okay, so we wanted to touch on that a little bit. Because you know that you'll see people that they put them on either side. They'll have Judah, and then they'll put Issachar on the left and Zebulun on the right. Reuben with Simeon on the left and Gad on the right. This is just to show that once you start that cardinal direction, eastward or sunriseward, and when I look at this, I'm thinking of this up and down as opposed to like flat on a surface looking north, east, southwest. Again, I'm thinking more abstractly, that this could be, upwards and downwards too, right? As far as what it's trying to show and explain, as far as that vision that we get in Ezekiel of what it is. So, okay, so where were we going to go? Where do we leave off? One thing I wanted to note was on these ratios. These ratios right here, again, Levi being 2250. So we needed to add in Levi's number of 2250 here. And then we'll take this same thing here. Oh, that ain't right. What did I do? Okay. And then our total is going to be the sum of all of these. We'll make sure that's correct. 605,800 again, with this Levi addition in the first census. So one thing I wanted to do was look at the ratio. So we looked at, this was the ratio of all of these to Levi. Well, we're going to continue this and look at the ratio for the given total of 605,800. So 269.244 repeating is going to be our ratio of Levi to the total. But we should also look at what was it in the previous total, 603,550. And we know that that's going to be one less than this number is what it'll end up being. But we also want to know that, okay, what is it going to be in the second census? So we're going to look ahead real quick, and we'll know that 601,730 is going to be what the population reduces in the 40 years later, right, in the second census. So, and we'll get into that later on, maybe in this video, I don't know. So now we want to look and see, well, what is the difference? What is the difference now between these ratios? What is the change? So obviously we know that it's going to be from here to here, it's just going to be 1, because where the difference is going to be the number itself. And then the difference from our original number in the second census. Oh, what am I doing wrong there? I think I got that wrong here somehow. Hold on a second. Equals this minus this. Okay, that's right. 1.88. Right, and then the difference between these two will be, okay. All right, so the difference in the ratio between the second census given number, the first census given number, and our adjusted total, you'll see is going to be this 0.808, 1.808, and you think, well, what is this? What does it matter? Well, it's interesting if we double this number. We get this number 1.617 repeating. And if we double this number, then of course it's going to be 3.618 essentially, right? So 1.618, 3.618. Those that aren't familiar with phi, the number for growth, I've got another video that I did on the golden ratio, or the golden angle, I guess. And I touch on this a little bit there, but easiest way that we can show this is just to, we can just create a sequence equals this number plus this number, and then we'll carry that all the way down. And we're going to create a Fibonacci sequence here. And again, it's interesting that we hit on some of these numbers continually, right? 233. We'll see 610, or at least 61 is a factor here in a little bit too, but 13. You see these numbers pop up pretty frequently, but you know, if you're going to be finding the ratio, we're going to be looking at the number divided by its preceding number, and you'll see how this will, as we work our way down the sequence, we get closer and closer to this number, this number for phi. And you know, modern in today, you know, we understand that the formula for phi is we're looking for the square root of 5, and then we're going to be adding 1 to this number, and then we're going to be dividing that by 2 to get our sort of harmonic. And we know that this is the number right here that is going to be relative to phi. And we talked about the Lucas sequence, which is the Fibonacci sequence times the square root of 5. I don't know if I'll get into that here today, but we do have the, trying to think where it is. Did I have that, the Fibonacci square? Yeah, we won't get into this right now, but I'm sorry for that. We'll talk about this another day. And I lost my I lost my deal. Sorry, bear with me real quick while I try to find my other spreadsheet. Not good enough with Mac yet, I don't think here. I've completely lost it. What's going on? Okay, here we go. All right. So, anyways, so we've got this number for phi, and it's showing up right here when we're looking at the ratios of Levi to these totals and the differences between them, right? We get this number right here that's very close to phi showing up. And then this number right here is actually, if we look at the square root of 5, which is this number right here, and if we were to multiply that times phi, you know, you're going to get phi plus 2, right? Or, yeah, phi squared plus 1, however you want to look at it. So anyway, you're getting both of these figures are showing up right here. And this is in the ratio, double of the ratio. So, you know, I noticed this early on, and of course it led me down a path of starting associating phi. Also, you're going to get this 233 number, right? This 233 is a factor that's going to show up in all of your breakdowns of the total. So the total number right here, total including Levi, 605,800. When we reduce that by that common multiple of 50, it comes down to 12,116. And then for that grouping of man would be a quarter of that, 3029. So yeah, remember this number 605,800 is 4 times this number. This number, when you reduce it by that common denominator of 50, comes down to 3029. And 3029 has two factors, 13 and 233. 233 is the 13th Fibonacci number. 13 is the 7th Fibonacci number. So I thought that was interesting that happened like that. But we also want to look at, I think I'm jumping ahead of myself here a little bit, but I just wanted to capture that on that 2250 again, because we're going to come back to this phi number again. So that's a quick introduction there. But all right, so you know, I was trying to figure out where to set this, where to begin, and with that the blessing of Reuben, the beginning of my strength, dignity, and excellence. So we started with Reuben right on that south line. Again, we had this 90-degree element, Gad right here, and then we had Levi position right here at the time being. But really, when I started looking at the second census is where you start thinking that, you know, you don't think that Levi is positioned properly here. So you know that in the blessing that you're given is that Levi and Simeon are brothers. Remember, this is the grouping of man right here. And you know in the scripture right here, if we go back to Genesis 49 again, sorry, we know that Simeon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty, their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret. Unto their assembly mine honor be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and their self-will they dig down a wall. So over here, I guess the actual, in deliberation of them must not be, she is entering soul of me, in assembly of them must not be, she is uniting glory of me. That in anger of them they killed man, and in approval of them they felled bull. So sure, that's interesting that, you know, sure, bull, this is what you're going to be getting for the ox. So when we talk about the face of the ox, or that grouping of Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, That's the face from Ezekiel's vision that you're looking at, is the Shur right here. Shur, Nashur, Adam, and the Arya for the lion, right? So, at any rate, this is why I ended up changing this orientation. So I started with Levi right here, and if we look at I meant to show you this in the thing again for Gad. So when we come down and we're going to look at Gad, again, Reuben was unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because they went up to the father's bed and they defaughtest thou, he went up to my couch. So I figure we're right in starting everything from Reuben, because Reuben we're figuring he can't move, he can't excel. And, the descendant of Reuben, I didn't show you, was Elitzur, which means the rock of God, and we could look that up if we wanted to. Maybe we'll do that here in a minute. But so I thought it's interesting that we can start this whole construction of this from that point, that cornerstone, so to speak, right? So where are we at for Gad? I wanted to show you with Gad because I thought that was interesting. With his Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome the last. So Gad, raiding party, he shall raid him, and he shall raid heel. And then it goes from Asher, nutritious bread of him, and he shall give luxuries of king. Okay, so Gad, raiding party, he shall raid him, and he shall raid heel. So let's look at what happens with Gad right here. So, because right now I've got Levi right here, but I figure that Levi needs to be next to Simeon, because Levi and Simeon are brethren. So I'm like, okay, is he going to go on this side of Gad, or is he going to go on this side of Gad? Or on this side of Simeon? Which side? Well, when you look at the second census, and let me see if I've got those figures for you. We'll look at the second census real quick. So the second census, you're going to be, get this number tool back up. So the second census, these are your totals, and you're totaling 601,730. And it's of note that Reuben, when you're looking at all the numbers, just like in the first census, we had one number that wasn't a multiple of 100. And that ended up being Gad's number of 45,650. And we found interesting ties to that number in the gematria and everything in the scriptures. So Reuben here is the one number here that's not a multiple of 100, and he's got this extra 30 attached to him, right? So Reuben's number right here, 43,730. So you're kind of, when you keep this 605,800 in the second census, you'll see that if Levi is always going to be the balance, he's going to come in and be whatever he needs to be to maintain this 605,800, just as we're seeing in the first census. Well, then Levi's number now becomes 4070 in the second census, right? Because 605,100 minus 601,730 is 4070. So that would mean that Reuben and Levi, if you keep them together, then you would get an even 100 number, and a number that you could reduce down by that common multiple of 50. So for that reason, I decided to keep Levi next to Reuben. Now, you'll see also in the scripture, when we're going to look at the second census in Numbers chapter 26, I think this is also fitting, because right after mention of, again, we're talking about Judah and the families, Zebulun, right? We're going in the same general order, but after we're talking about, or did I miss it already? Sorry, Reuben. Okay, Reuben, and then we get, so right after Reuben, in the grouping right here, we're talking about Korah. We're getting Korah swallowed up right here in the mentioning of this. So right after Reuben is mentioned, you have all of this fallout that happens with the Levites and Moses, Korah, of Kohath, okay? And then you're going to be talking about Simeon afterwards. So because this is happening in the chapter 26 of Numbers there, I figure it's fitting that when you're laying this out and you're going to make this, that we can put, it's appropriate to put Levi in between Simeon and Reuben right here for that reason, because of what we see in the second census, and because Levi and Simeon are brothers and they dig down a wall together, right? They dig down a wall, this sort of warring spot. And then also with Gad, a troop overcoming him, but he shall overcome the last. Because what this is going to do with these guys even at 90 degrees right here is you're going to take Levi out and you're going to inject him in right here, and it's going to push Gad past this west cardinal line, and it's going to push him past by an even amount, by that same 2250 in this first census. So what I did was instead of keeping Levi right here, we're going to move him and we're going to place him in this other position next to Reuben here. I'll get rid of these extra directions here. We don't need those. These extra markers. I kind of took all this apart to help with a demonstration of this. Hopefully it's making sense to people, or it's effective. So yeah, now we've got Gad pushed past this line again, and we've got Levi plugged in right here next to Reuben. So now what I'm thinking is, what are these bifurcations? What are the bifurcations here? Because before we were splitting Dan and we were splitting Judah, and now that we put Levi in right here because of the second census, we're splitting Gad right here. So this troop that overcomes him is going to be this 2250. So maybe there's meaning. Maybe there's meaning here in these, how these are getting broken up. So I decided to plug these in to find out, how is Judah being broke up right here? What are the bifurcations of Judah and the bifurcations of Dan from these compass lines? And so what you do from this point is you can kind of work whichever one you want to start with first. You could break up Dan first and find out what amount of Dan is north or east of the compass line or west of the compass line, and then of Judah, what amount is on either side of the east compass line. So we can start with Judah as the easiest because, it's pretty easy. We can just take Zebulun and Issachar together, and we can add those two terms. So one thing that you'll find when we add Zebulun and Issachar together, so we'll take the sum of those two, we're going to get 111,800. And if we were to remember, the least common multiple is 50. If we divide that by 50, we see that's 2236. Well, it's interesting that is also a pattern of numbers that we see in the square root of 5, okay? 2236. So that's kind of interesting that pops up right there, that happens like that. And remember, we'll go back and relook at this, but remember these were singular in that pakad, that word for the appointed number. It was pointed out that these three were singular in that first census, okay, in that chapter 2 account. So I think we're being pointed to group these three together, but we'll get down that in a second here. But at any rate, 111,800. Now we're going to see how much difference is that from this quarter, which we know to be 151,450. Okay, so we're just going to see what is the difference now between the quarter minus this addition of Zebulun and Issachar together, and we're going to come up with 39,650. So if we reduce that by its least common multiple of 50, is 793, which that will be interesting down the road. But so we got 39,650 on this side of Judah. Now we want to see what's left on the other side of Judah. So we'll call this Judah South. And on Judah North now is going to equal Judah's number, 74,600, minus this number. And we're going to get 34,950. If we reduce that by its least common multiple, we see it's 699. Now 699, the multiples of 699 are going to be 3 and 233. So 233 is showing up again. That prime factor number for our total of Israel is showing up in Judah North. So 3 times 233, that shows up again. 793 has 2 factors, 61 and 13. Again, 61 is relative to a Fibonacci term right here by a factor of 10, as is 13. So you're getting, what you get from those are 233, 13, and 61, right? Reduced by a factor of 10. So it's interesting that once again, in the factors of Judah, great power in Judah, when you're breaking down these numbers, you're getting all Fibonacci numbers again. So, I mean, you can say if that's coincidence, I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep going on what this is going to mean. So we've established that. Now we want to see, okay, what is the degree representation? We'll get to Dan. I'll show you some of the breakouts for Dan later, but for right now, we know that there's great power in Judah. If we look at that, if we're going to go back and look at our Genesis, let's see where we're at, our blessing for Judah. Our blessing for Judah here, we have, sorry about that, whom thou brethren shall praise, thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies, thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Hold on a second. Divide them in Jacob's. Okay. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down and crouched as a lion. And as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him the gathering of the people. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass is called unto choice of vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes blood in the grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. So there's a bunch of stuff in here on Judah. I thought there was some mention here of, I'll have to go back and find where that was. But, so there's interesting here in, what does that mean? Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before me. So, and there's great power in Judah, is what we're told, right? I'll have to find the reference for that. But, so yeah, 39,650. We're breaking this up into 2 pieces. So now let's see what is going to be the degree representation for Judah South. If we're going to take this and we're going to divide it by our new number, 605,800, and multiply it by 360, we're going to get that it's 23.56 degrees. Now recall that when we're talking about the relationship of the sun and the moon and this other relationship we're talking about, these have to do with the ecliptic. Okay, the ecliptic we understand is 23.5 degrees. So this inclination of the moon off the ecliptic of 5 degrees was relevant, as was the inclination range, the solar range for your tropical range off of the equator, right, that's relevant to the ecliptic. So that's right on par, and we're finding that number. So one other thing that we can find with this number is we want to look at, okay, what is just the amount when we divided this number by 605,800. We got this figure right here. Now, if we were to multiply this by 4, this number times 4, as it turns out, is very close to, you see a pattern of numbers of 261803. Okay, so our phi squared number, if we were to multiply this times itself, right, our 261804, right, we're right on par right here, 261803. You see how we're pretty close to being dead on to a phi squared relationship when we multiply that percentage by 4, right? So that's pretty interesting, right? So that's probably not coincidental that this number right here is going to be relative to phi squared. So it's phi squared divided by 10, right, to the total. So what to do with this? One other thing that we see from this number right here is if we divide this number by 9, this degree finding, if we divide it by 9, we also get, right, we're getting this phi squared number again. So what does that mean? What's the significance of that? Well, one thing that you'll see is that when we start looking at the, I gotta reduce this and move it over. I don't know where I put that. Oh, here it was, sheet 5. So one thing about the analemma of the sun, if you're going to measure the analemma of the sun, this is going to be off of just a standard globe model of the world. But one thing that you'll find on this particular model is going to be the layout, right? You're going to get the breakout of the sun analemma, right? The analemma of the sun based off of the latitudes, the given latitudes. So you're going to see from 0, we'll call the equator 0, at 9 degrees north is where you have the crossing over of your analemma, okay? So because we have this relationship from 0 right here, we'll call the equator 0, and this was 9 degrees and this is 23.5 degrees north. Well, we saw that figure that we got out of Judah South gave us this 23.56 degree finding. Well, that is equivalent to phi squared times 9, and the crossing is happening at 9 degrees north. So from this information we're getting out of the book of Numbers here, and with this layout of the encampment, we can see that 9 degrees north, right, this we can reduce this down by a factor of 9 and we'll get 1 to phi squared down here. So the distance from the equator, the relative distance to the crossing is going to be 1. From the crossing to our solstice up here is going to be phi, right? And then the distance from the equator to the solstice is going to be 1 plus phi, which is phi squared, right? And then the distance from the, right, that gives us phi squared distance from the equator to our outer solstice, right? And then plus 1 is going to be 3.618, which is the same as phi squared times the square root of 5. So what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of relationship between phi and the square root of 5, obviously, but the combination of those two, right? Phi squared, and 1 to, right, this portion to this portion is relative 1 to the square root of 5, which is 2.236. Okay, so we're seeing this breakup in the this breakup over here of the number. So it's a very significant find of seeing when you take this layout of the camp. Also, while I'm here, I guess we can talk about that. That means that the total distance from solstice to solstice would be 23. This would be phi squared times 2. So phi squared times 2 is going to be 5.236. Recall that a cubit is 52.36 centimeters. Okay, so we're seeing that pattern of numbers for the cubit in phi and everything as well here too. So when it's breaking us down and giving us proportional dimensions in these biblical numbers, we can associate that back into understanding the total relationship for this, right? So that's just something I wanted to point out here. But let's get back to our layout of the camp here, because that's what we're trying to focus on. Try not to get off on tangents here, but it's kind of hard not to. So what happens now is that this portion of Judah South is pretty important, right? Because now once we've lined this up and Reuben's on this southern line, and we've had Gad here, and now we've moved Levi in, and we've created this bifurcation, and then now we're really looking at these bifurcations and what they mean. And there's great power in Judah. Well, Judah, we know from that he's going to be in the neck of his opposing tribes and everything, right? And we see that this is a very significant number, this 23.5 degrees. This is the relative to your ecliptic. So if this is giving us a snapshot of a particular time of essentially how the clock is working, right, then we can see that, I don't know what I did there. We can see that when we do this overlay like this here, this should be right on the line here, basically Judah's thing. This isn't exact, but yeah. So what I did was I just created an ecliptic cross right here so that we could extend this out. So now that we see that we can run this 23.5 degrees and run it into all 4 quadrants, and I'm doing this because, one, for the name Yehuda, right? It's Yod He Vav He with a Dalet added in it on the one side of the divide, right? But also, you know, we had to multiply this by 4 to get our phi squared number right here, our 2.618. So it seems appropriate that we're carrying this through 4 times, right? Same thing, just like with our sun analemma from solstice, equator to solstice, back to the equator to solstice and back. It's essentially 4 movements of that 23.5 degrees, right? So it makes sense whether we're going to look at this as some kind of key to a calendar, or we're going to look at it as key to some cosmological, like the construct of our world, is kind of what my focus is on this. But it's appropriate to both of these things, as it's telling you the actions of how things are happening, right? How everything's working, the sort of the cosmological clock that of our creation, of how it's all working. And it's giving it to us in these very sophisticated mathematical finds. You got to remember that some of these things that we're referencing here are not available to us like just easily, or you know, like the formula for phi. You know, it hasn't been around that long, right? It's coming way after the giving of this scripture, this text here. So this, I think, is probably where I'll stop on this video right now, is just showing you how we're getting to getting this ecliptic finding right here, right? We're finding this great power in Judah South. We found this 23.5 degree piece. Once we laid this out, we're in a circle. We've got Reuben to Gad being the 90 degrees, right? We figured out where to put Levi in this based off of the blessings and everything else, and kind of what we're seeing in the second census. We're moving Levi into this position. Right now we're counting and figuring out the meaning of maybe these bifurcations based off of what we knew from Gad, right? And then now we found this 23.5 degree piece. We're going to extend this ecliptic cross with our cardinal cross right here, and now it seems we've got more to find. We've got more to dig out here, because we still got to go and find the bifurcations of Dan. Maybe this ecliptic cross right here, as well as the cardinal cross, is going to give us more insight into something, right? Maybe we're going to draw out some more meaning, right, from these other bifurcations, and we still have to look at the second census on what's going to change. Then we got to look at, from all of this, we're given all these numbers for the Levites, right? That we're told that sort of like the governing body are getting pulled in, right, held to a higher standard, and to keep the law, they're getting pulled in the center here to sort of do all the work of the tabernacle. So there's other things happening with those numbers that we're going to have to draw out. We're going to have to investigate a little bit. So I'll break. I know that this was pretty scattered. We're going to this one was probably pretty screwy, but I'm just gonna keep it and post this stuff up, and then we'll continue on from this point. Hopefully I haven't been too all over the place for people, and hopefully this is hitting home of kind of what this is going to mean and where it's going. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.